So the Tzimtzum created an enormous change, a critical change, meaning that before the Tzimtzum, Elokus is Bepshitus. Elokus is obvious, is Pashut. That means that even worlds before the Tzimtzum, and there are spheres before the Tzimtzum, there are worlds in Hashem's vision before the Tzimtzum. But worlds before the Tzimtzum are Elokus. Even worlds are Elokus, part of Him. The Tzimtzum changed things around. That now worlds are Bepshitus. Worlds are given. Worlds are obvious, are simple. But Elokus is B'Yitzchakshus. Elokus is not the obvious. So in the world, even the Elokus in the world is also worldly. Again, before the Tzimtzum, even worlds are godly. After the Tzimtzum, even godliness is worldly. So what the Tzimtzum changed is enormous. Because before the Tzimtzum, everything, even worlds, are godly, are godliness. After the Tzimtzum, even godliness after the Tzimtzum is worldly. Let's get to our learning a little bit. And today is Beis Tamuz, and before we began the recording, so Fegi led the little Farbrengen for Erev Beis Tamuz, which is calling us to, basically she's calling us to transform our expectations of reality, of Hashem, of our relationship with Hashem, to be, rather than be submissive and passive, to become active and proactive in our expectations, in our relationship with Hashem, in our expectation for Him to respond accordingly. And she sources herself by saying that the Navi says that this is the wish of Hashem Himself, that doesn't want to be called, will not be called anymore Baali, rather than Ishi, my man. And my man means that he doesn't make any decisions without hearing or having in mind my voice. Doesn't mean that he has to submit himself to me, but I am an integral part of his decision making. Okay, thank you for that. So last time, we are on page Reish Chavav. The line starts, Heder Chulu Venimtza Delevad Zot She'aor Eino Atzmus. So we are towards the conclusion of the Rebbe's Hasidus objection to the view of the early Mekubalim. And in that discussion, we distinguish between Ratzon or Gilui Tiv'i or Gilui Ratzoini. Ratzon necessitates a change, a shinui. And therefore Ratzon cannot be in Atzmus, because if there is Ratzon coming up in Atzmus, claim Chassidus that, and the Ramak, that is causing a change in Atzmus. Then there is Gilui Tivi. What is Gilui Tivi? It's like the sunlight from the sun. It's like Gilui in the sense of automatic, but it's Tivi. It's natural, which means that sun doesn't have a choice. Then we define Gilui Retzoini. It's a Gilui on one hand, like the sun, light from the sun. It's a gilui, doesn't require a special ratzon, doesn't require a special will, a new will for it to happen, and doesn't require efforts, and doesn't require islapshus to invest the ma'or in the or. It happens mimele, as we call it, naturally. That's the gilui part. But unlike the sun, which doesn't have a say whether its light will shine or not, in case of Or Ein Sof, Hasidus calls it Gilui Retzoni, meaning that it is with Hashem's consent that the light shines. And if Hashem wants, it would not. So it's Gilui but Retzoni. It's by choice. Eino Mukhrach. So in Or Ein Sof, in this type of revelation, on one hand, it's a revelation like light, and therefore doesn't cause a shinui, doesn't cause a change, like the sunlight doesn't change the sun. And at the same time, eino muchach. The sun is muchach. It has to shine. Hashem doesn't have to emit his light. So therefore, when it comes to ratzon, which means kesser, that means ratzon mamash, a will that arises. We call it kadmo heder mamash. Regarding ratzon, our view is kadmo heder mamash. If it's a ratzon that wasn't there before, and now there is a ratzon, that means that it was preceded by non-existence. Now, Or Ein Sof is similar to ratzon. Ratzon, as we discussed already, and we'll say more about it, comes up in Or Ein Sof. After Or Ein Sof is begilui, in Or Ein Sof, ratzon for worlds comes up. So ratzon is kadmo haheder mamash. Ratzon is literally preceded by non-existence. What about Or Ein Sof? Or Ein Sof is similar to ratzon in the sense that Or Ein Sof is not mukhrach. It's not a must on Hashem to have light. And therefore Hashem is willing for the light to shine. At the same time, there was no time that there was no light. By choice, but that's the fact. Actually, there was always Or Ein Sof. As long as Atmuz was there, his Or was there. But is it Muchach? No. It's by Hashem's choice. So on one hand, it is not an absolute existence. You cannot call it Kadmon. And it's not an absolute existence because it depends on God's will. If he wills, there will be light. If he won't, there won't be light. And therefore, Hasidus calls Or Ein Sof kemo kadmo haheder. It is like preceded by non-existence. Literally and actually, it's not, because Or Ein Sof was always there. But potentially, or in essence, Or Ein Sof is mechudash in that sense, is anew, because it can exist or not exist, up to Hashem, and therefore it's like Kadmo Haheder Mamash. It's like Kadmo Haheder. It's like preceded by non-existence. It's like all other beings except for Atmuz, which is the only one that really was not preceded by non-existence, and therefore it's called Kadmon. It's primordial, and its existence is absolute. So this is up to what we got to now. And now, after explaining that Or Ein Sof is nimshach in a manner of Gilui Retzoni, and therefore it's not Kadmon, because number one, it begins from God, it has a beginning, so it cannot be called Kadmon. It's Or has a mouth, so Or begins somewhere. If it begins somewhere, it's not Kadmon. Especially if we are told that it depends on Hashem's will, then for sure it's not Kadmon. Rather, we decided that Or Ein Sof is Kemo Shekadmo HaHeder. It's as if preceded by non-existence. So the conclusion from that is that not only that you cannot say about the light that it's Atzmus, like the Mekubalim say about Sfiras HaKesser, that it's part of Atzmus. You cannot say that. And it's not Kadmon. Rather, it is really Mechudash. It's Enu. And how much more so Ratzon that comes up in Or Ein Sof, and is nimshach in a manner of באופן ריצוני by Hashem. Or Ein Sof itself is nimshach in an automatic way, so to speak, which means Hashem doesn't have to invest and to create a special will to emit light. It happens automatically. Like every person we discussed last time has a certain aura. And he doesn't invest, he doesn't consciously have to invest himself in order to exude this aura. But unlike Hashem, unlike us, Hashem can decide that he doesn't want to exude this aura. Yes, it's mimele, he doesn't have to make an effort. But if he wants, he doesn't have to exude this aura. And therefore, it's Mechudash, Or Ein Sof. How much more so Ratzon? For Ratzon, you have to be intentful. You have to invest yourself. So Ratzon for sure is Mechudash. And therefore, the Rebbe is asking, how can the Mekubalim call Kesser, which is Ratzon, Kadmon, like the Kadmus of Hashem? Primordial. So let's read him inside. V'nimtza, like 8 lines from the bottom of the paragraph. ונמצא דלבד זאת שהאור ריש כף וו. 8 lines from the bottom of the paragraph, הדר חולו, ונמצא דלבד זאת שהאור אינו עצמוס. Not only that the light is not עצמוס, ומשום זה אינו נופל עליו לומר שם קדמוס, and because of that, you cannot say קדמוס, primordial, about light, because the light is coming out of Atmos itself in a manner of Gilui Retzoni. And actually, the Metzius of light is not Metzius Amitis. The existence of light is not a true existence, because it's Gilui Retzoni. It's by choice. So if Hashem wants, it will exist, and if He doesn't, it won't. So it's not really even a true Metzius, like the Metzius of Hashem Himself, Atzmus Hashem. And therefore, surely, Or is not Atzmus and is not Kadmon like Hashem, like Atzmus itself. So with these words, there are 2 things that the Rebbe is rejecting. Number 1, the Kesser, and even before Kesser, Or itself, Or Ein Sof. Or is not Atzmus, that's number 1. And number 2, is the second point. You can apply the term kadmus, primordial, on or, on light. So how can they say that after explaining that Or Ein Sof itself is not Kadmon, how can they say that Ratzon is Kadmon? עוד זו, says the Rebbe, more than that, שהוא מחודש באמס. Since the revelation of the light depends on Hashem's choice, גילוי רצוני, and it's as if קדמו ההדר, then it's mamash mechudash, it's mamash enu. So Rabbi Gopin explains here, if you want to follow a little deeper here. He says like this: you could think that's true. The light is being created from Atzmus, from the essence, and it's not Kadmon, it's not primordial. But since the way the light is revealed does not depend on a direct Ratzon, rather light is mispashet, is spreading. Bederach mimele, in like an automatic way. If this is the case, there was no point at which light did not exist, and it cannot be possible that Atzmus will be without light. We could have thought like that. Like just as, I'm going to skip it because it's a whole discussion, but we could have looked at Or Ein Sof just as we look at the sunlight. That just as sun, it's a must, so to speak. It's an axiom that the sun will come with package deal with its light. There cannot be a sun without sunlight. So we could think the same thing about Or Ein Sof. In that sense, Or Ein Sof is less true than the sunlight. Because the sunlight is a must. The sun has to shine. And therefore, the sun really has a metzius, has a chashivos here. I mean, at the light. Because the light is a must. If the sun exists, the light exists. The sunlight has no choice. And therefore, the metzius of sunlight is quite a truthful metzius from the perspective of this world. But this is not the case with Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof is not a must like the sunlight. And therefore, even the pashtus of Or Ein Sof itself is not true at all, because it's up to Hashem. It's not a true metzius. We defined already what is a true metzius. A true metzius is a metzius that is not preceded by non-metzius, by non-existence. I'm repeating. A true existence is an existence that is not preceded by non-existence. And the only one that has authentically this quality is Atzmus, as we defined Kadmon. Because Atzmus was not preceded, God himself was not preceded by non-existence, always was. So we could think that Or Ein Sof is like the or of the sun. But no, we are learning that it is Retzoni. It is by choice. And therefore, it is not as true. So, the Rebbe is rejecting the Shita of the Mekubalim that say that Ratzon is Kadum, is primordial. וכל שכן בחינת הרצון שהוא מחודש. So if we say about Or Ein Sof that is מחודש, that is as new, why? Because it is by choice. If Hashem wants, it doesn't exist, and therefore it is similar to all other creations that are preceded by non-existence. And the first one of them perhaps is Ratzon, because in Or Ein Sof shows up Ratzon that didn't exist before. for worlds. So if Or Ein Sof is מחודש, וכל שכן, says the Rebbe, how much more so בחינת הרצון שהוא מחודש. That how much more so רצון that shows up anew in Or Ein Sof, how much more so רצון is מחודש. רצון is anew. And why is it? Because Or Ein Sof is בגילוי בדרך ממילא, in a natural way, without special effort, so to speak, a special desire by God. But Ratzon doesn't happen ממילא. Ratzon is something that is mamash mechudash, that wasn't there before, and now Hashem has to will it. Where does this will show up? In Or Ein Sof. So, if Or Ein Sof, which is kemo kadmo haheder, it is as if preceded by non-existence, because it always was, practically. If Or Ein Sof is mechudash, how much ratzon, kesser, which is kadmo haheder mamash, which is really preceded by non-existence, it's new. Like we said, you pass by a store, you see a dress, you want it. You didn't want it before. It's new. It's a new ratzon. And you have to invest yourself in this ratzon if you want anything to happen. Doesn't come mimele like your aura. So if Or Ein Sof, which is kemo, as if kadmo heder, is mechudash, is a new, how much more so kesser, which is in, or ratzon, which is in Or Ein Sof, that kadmo heder, that was preceded by not existing, how much more so it is mechudash. And if you ask, how is it possible that ratzon is mechudash and yet doesn't make a change by Hashem? So that's why the Rebbe says that's why we hold, unlike the Ramak, which we soon will get to, שעניין הרצון הוא בהאור והגילוי. The inyan of ratzon, of Kesser, is in the light, not in Atzmus, not in God himself, rather in his light. And בהגילוי, and not just the light the way it is included in Atzmus, the light the way it is revealed. Or Ein Sof, the way it is revealed. שכבר האיר בגילוי מאיתו יתברך. The Ratzon shows up in the light that already was revealed from God himself. That means that the Ratzon for worlds is not in Atzmus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, doesn't show up in the essence of God, rather Or Ein Sof, that's the one that wants the worlds. Ratzon shows up in Or Ein Sof. And in Or Ein Sof, which is not the Atzmus of Hashem, there can be a change. וכמו שכתוב בעץ חיים, as it says by the Arizal, in Eitz Chaim, that Chaim Vital wrote, the Torah of the Arizal. Da כי טרם שנאצלו חולו, before the spheres were emanated, or before worlds were emanated, היה אור עליון פשוט ממלא חולו. There was a divine light, a pure, simple divine light, plain light, that filled the whole halal, the whole space. And then, וכשעלה ברצונו הפשוט חולו. And then the Ratzon came up. That even before the Nivraim were emanated, there was an Or Elyon Pashut, there was a plain divine light, which is Or Ein Sof. And in Or Ein Sof, there was a hisoirerus, an awakening, an arousal in a ratzon, in a will and a desire to create worlds, not in the atzmus of Hashem. And memele, there is no shino in the atzmus. Ve'im kein, and if this is the case, ein no shtayach klal lomar ratzon kadum chulu. It is not at all acceptable to call ratzon kadum, a primordial will. So after this Haggah, this parenthesis in which the Rebbe is proving that even Or Ein Sof is not primordial, is not kadum. How much more so ratzon, which comes up in Or Ein Sof, that is not kadum, is not primordial. Now we come back to before the Haggah, to the question on the Shita of the Mekubalim that claim that Kesser is kadum, is primordial. Umimele, and as a result of all these discussions, says the natural conclusion, says the Rebbe, is Eino shayach lomar al ze shem kadmon chas v'shalom klal uchlal. We cannot say about Kesser and Ratzon, we cannot apply the term kadmon, primordial, chas v'shalom, God forbid, whatsoever. Not at all. So, Or Ein Sof is not kadum, rather mechudash, is not primordial, rather it is mechudash, is enu. How much more so Ratzon and Kesser that are mechudashim, and you cannot say that there are Ein Sof that creates worlds. Now, in addition to the first question in the Shita of the Mekubalim, that Ratzon is not primordial, rather mechudash, the Rebbe continues and brings more reasons why the approach of the Mekubalim is not acceptable, since, and a few points. One of them is that Ratzon is really, when you relate to the Ratzon, what it is, Kesser, Ratzon, what it is, you see that it has a specific description and definition, which is similar to all other spheros. Ratzon is higher than the other spheros, but it's a sphere, it has a description and a definition, it's a specific definition. And you cannot say about, therefore, that Ratzon is pashut betachlis apshitus, it is plain and pure and free of any description. This is the way we define the Ein Sof. We define Ein Sof that it Ein Sof is pashtuso, but Ein Sof means also that it's above and not subjected to any description and any definition. So you cannot say that about Kesser. Kesser is a definition. Ratzon is a definition. You cannot compare and identify Ratzon with Atzmus of Hashem, that you can give any definition to it. Or Mimele, you cannot say that is Ein Sof Amiti. Read inside. V'gam ech yeto'ar Ratzon b'shem Ein Sof. How can you call Ratzon Ein Sof the way we define Ein Sof? Ki pirush Ein Sof, and everybody agrees, the Ramak and the Mekubalim, everybody agrees the meaning of what it means, Ein Sof. Ein Sof is pashtuso, and Ein Sof means be above any gdarim, any categories or definitions or descriptions. Ki pirush Ein Sof, hainu shehu pashut betachlis apshitus. Ein Sof means that it is totally plain. ומושלל מגדר חוכמה או שאר מהוס פרטי שיוכלו לומר עליו כי זה הוא. That means that Ein Sof is negated from any category, whether it is Chokhmah or any other definition or any other mahus, any other entity. Therefore, you cannot say anything about Ein Sof and say that this is it, that this is what Ein Sof is. You cannot say about Ein Sof what it is. because it's pashut, betachlis apshitus, no descriptions, no definitions. And the Mekubalim agree with this definition of Ein Sof. And since Ratzon is a definition and is a description similar to the other spheros, how can we call it Ein Sof? And Take, the Mekubalim, they hold that Ratzon is Pashut, and therefore Kesser, that according to what they claim, is not included in the spheros. Rather, it's part of Atzmus. But this itself requires explanation. How can you say about something specific like Ratzon that is Pashut like Ein Sof? It is by definition, it has its own definition. ולכן, and therefore, the Rebbe supports now this claim. How can Ratzon is something specific? It's a certain definition. It's not Ein Sof. It's will or desire or crown. It's something, and Ein Sof is nothing, no category, no definition whatsoever. It's infinite. ולכן, and therefore, how do we relate to Ein Sof? We call it Nikra Kadosh. We call Ein Sof Kadosh. Holy means Leshon Havdalah. Kadosh means separate, removed. שמובדל בערך מכל מהוס ותואר פרטי. Why we call Ein Sof Kadosh? Hashem Kadosh and Shimcha Kadosh. Your name is also Kadosh. That's because Miriam says that or me'ein ha'ma'or, or carries something from the ma'or. Okay? But Kadosh means that you are totally removed, that you are incomparable to any entity or any definition or any specific description. As the Maharal from Prague explains, that the reason why Hashem is called Kadosh, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and not Sechel Baruch Hu. We call him HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the God blessed be him, not Sechel blessed be him, not intellect blessed be him, because he is Pashut Betachlis Apshitus, totally plain, and therefore we cannot describe him with any Toar, with any description. We cannot call him Sechel, not even the perfection of wisdom. And therefore, Nikra Kadosh, because it's removed and exalted and separate and incomparable to any description. And according to this, it's not understood. How can you call Kesser or Ratzon, which is a specific description and a defined description, how can you call it Ein Sof? Let's stop here, and Mirza Hashem, next time we are finishing basically the objections. I was hoping to do it today, but we are finishing the objections of the Hasidus to the Day of the Mekubalim, of the early Mekubalim, and we will also present few objections to the Shita of the Ramak that we mainly follow, and then focus on the Shita of the Alter Rebbe. Be'ezus Hashem.